You guys missed something? Let's see what you're hanging up.
Okay. Sorry about this.
My goodness, good for you. In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, please note the following: all Bernardsville Borough Planning Board meetings will be held in person at the meeting hall on the second floor of the Bernardsville Municipal Building at 166 Brook Road. Meetings will be live streamed on YouTube with no opportunity for public comment on YouTube. Members of the public wishing to offer comments or ask questions will be required to attend meetings in person. The YouTube live stream access for all meetings is YouTube at Bernardsville Borough/streams. This link will also be available in the agenda for each meeting, which is posted on the bulletin on the Borough website, bernardsvilleborough.org, and on the Borough Hall public bulletin board at least 48 hours prior to meetings. Notice of these changes has also been emailed to the Bernardsville News and the Courier News by posting a copy on the Borough website and by filing a copy with the municipal clerk all on January 16th, 2024. It is the intention of the board not to continue any matter past 11 p.m. at any regular or special meeting of the board unless a motion is passed by the members then present to extend to a later specified cutoff time, and same shall be announced at the opening of each meeting. In addition, the board does not intend to begin a new hearing after 10 p.m. nor begin testimony of a new witness after 10:30 p.m. Any hearing conducted by the board is a quasi-judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision. The quorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Roll call.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DeMarco?
Present.
Ms. Gardner is absent. Ms. Geller? Present. Mr. Graham?
Here.
Mr. Horowitz?
Here.
Mr. McLean is absent. Mr. Simoff?
Here.
Mr. Walden?
Here.
And Mr. Zazarino.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Meeting minutes. You got 24 came out earlier today. I saw Karen gave you some comments. Any comments from the board? Oh, okay.
So far with on, the September ones, and I made that correction. Okay.
Motion?
Motion to approve the minutes from, what are the dates? September 26th and October 10th.
And let's do
No, we don't have
Yeah.
the 24th
it. You
yet.
didn't send it? I was at 10
Yeah, the 10th is what she said.
today. Okay. Okay, I'll second. That's correct. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I have to abstain for the September meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Communications, there's the planning board letter. It's got a lot about, affordable housing in it, so it's sort of, presume it's worth reading, but.
Ongoing, primarily led by our borough attorney, Mr. Page.
Yeah. Is anyone here to discuss anything that's not related to tonight's agenda? Anything? This is the first opportunity. Seeing none, okay, we're to old business, so Steve, turn it over to you.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yeah, our first item of old business and our last item of old business is the resolution memorializing the AR at Bernardsville LLC matter. The first thing I wanted to do, if you'll bear with me, is there are a couple of non-material changes to the resolution that were provided to me very recently, and I just wanted to run through those so that when we adopt the resolution, we will adopt it as modestly revised. First, let me just remind everybody, this is the AR at Bernardsville LLC application, which was a preliminary and final major site plan approval and certain deviations from the Commerce Square redevelopment plan and a de minimis exemption from the requirements of the New Jersey Residential Site Improvement Standards, RSIS, in connection with a proposal to demolish 2 existing buildings and modify the structure of 1 existing building, and to construct a new mixed-use building that would consist of 68 market-rate residential apartment units, street-level commercial space, and a 2-level parking garage that would provide an effective calculated total of 134 off-street parking stalls, as well as constructing associated site improvements on property situated in the Commerce Square Development Zone, more commonly known as 39 Olcott Square, 35 Olcott Square, and 5 Morristown Road. Those changes that are provided to me very quickly, I'll run through them. Again, not material, but worthy, in my opinion, of making sure that we cover them when the board considers the resolution for adoption. Page 3, 4th line down, I incorrectly identified the railroad branch. It is the New Jersey Transit Gladstone branch. Number also slightly below paragraph 3, 3rd line down from in paragraph 3. It refers to lot 3 and the boiling house on lot, and then it later says lot 3 again. After the word lot, it should say lot 1. The lots at issue were lots 3 and 1. Moving forth to page 12. Again, my apologies, the paragraph 24, 3rd line, we have lots 2 and 3, lots 1 and 3. And then the next line down where it says connects to Mount Airy Road, that should say connects lot 1 to Mount Airy Road. Continuing page 16, and throughout the resolution, I referred to the 2nd floor of the proposed parking garage. To be more accurate and clear, it should be the upper floor of the parking garage throughout the resolution. Moving to page 18, paragraph 35, sub 7. I say the retaining wall on the east side of the eastern driveway would be softened. To be a little clearer, the impact of the retaining wall on the east side of the eastern driveway would be softened, is the King's English. It makes a little more sense. Page 21, paragraph 41, 3rd line down, referring to the testimony of Mr. Corrick, the traffic engineer for the applicant. It talks about the 195-foot site distance, and then I say, while substandard, to be more specific, I would say while substandard, as it is significantly below the minimum standard of 250 feet. And then it goes on to say, his testimony is that does not, comma, in his opinion, comma, pose any significant issue. Again, this is by way of clarification and improved English. Page 28, we're almost there. Paragraph 58, sub 4, I refer to questioning by Ms. Hazelton, and I say Mr. Smith deferred to answer her inquiries concerning fire safety. What I meant to say was deferred to another witness to answer her inquiries concerning fire safety. Page 32, my apologies to Barbara Long. I had her name as Barbara Lang. I believe that is incorrect. And I had her address as 282 Lloyd Road as opposed to 28-2 Lloyd Road. So double apologies to Ms. Long. The last item in page 50, paragraph 109, I neglected to put a sentence at the end of that traffic section, and that sentence would read, moreover, the board found that there is insufficient sight distance due to the building setback from Marshtown Road, comma, which will create, in the board's opinion, an unsafe condition, period. With those changes, that is the resolution as amended that I submit to the board members for consideration for adoption. Couple of things. There's always predicate issues, it seems. Number one, a reminder to the board, this was a denial. With any resolution, the board members who vote on the resolution are those who voted in favor of which way the decision went, if you will. So those 4 board members who voted no on the application are the 4 board members who are qualified to vote on the resolution of denial. I note for the record, everything we say tonight is for the record, right? I note for the, just a little duplicative. I note for the record that we have 3 of those board members on the dais with us this evening, board members Walden, Simla, and Vice Chair Horowitz, if I recall correctly. So we have more than enough to proceed with the motion, second, and adoption of the resolution. When I finally finish all the predicate issues, which I'm constrained not yet to finish, because as follows, we received a letter today. And I'm not going to read the letter into the record, but the letter was from the applicant's counsel objecting to the resolution. The applicant's counsel, the sum and substance of the objection is that there were multiple findings, in the opinion of applicant's counsel, multiple findings of fact. Let me stop here and reflect for the record that board member DeMarco was recused for this matter, remains recused from this matter. And my apologies for requesting that he just step down from the dais for the moment. And the record reflect that he has remained recused and silent. So, with so many predicate issues, I forgot the predicate to the predicate, I apologize. The objection from applicant's counsel is that he objects to multiple findings of fact in his opinion set forth in the draft resolution, which quote, frankly, blatantly mischaracterize and or fabricate the hearing record. And further objects to various legal conclusions set forth in the draft resolution as not being contrary to the actual findings articulated over the course of the public hearings. That's an opinion. That's a contention. Let me, he requested that letter be part of the record and provided to the board in advance of the board voting on the adopted resolutions. That letter was provided to the board, to my understanding, we received this letter about a couple hours ago. It was provided to the board before the meeting this evening, on the dais. Board members have it. I just sum and substance it. Feel free to read it in full as many times as you want. There's 2 problems I perceive with this objection. Number 1, it is incorrect as a matter of law. And number 2, it is incorrect as a matter of fact. Doesn't leave much left, does it? Let me explain what I mean by that for the board members who will be presumably voting to adopt the resolution memorializing the denial of the application this evening. I say it's for the record. It's incorrect as a matter of law because the governing case is Scully Bozarth Post number 1817 of the VFW versus Planning Board of City of Burlington. It's an appellate division published decision 362 NJ Super 296. It was decided July 21, 2003 and remains binding controlling law, not only on this board, but on any trial court that might hear arguably a potential appeal in the future. And that court decided that, and all the courts since have decided the same, there is no 2-part procedure whereby the board must deliberate and say certain things as individual board members when they decide a case, and that the ultimate resolution must somehow match that later on. In fact, the court specifically said that section 10G establishes that it is a memorializing resolution that, quote, provides the required findings of fact and conclusions of the board there is no mandatory two-step procedure. In fact, the court went on to say, in the zoning context, discussion by board members in the public forum is beneficial, but it is not mandatory. Individual members do not act. The board acts as a body in its memorializing resolution, which provides the body's findings and conclusions expressed by those who vote to adopt the resolution. The rationale, of course, is conditioned on the premise that those who vote to adopt have read the resolution provided to you that you have. You understand it. Don't vote if you don't. And you agree with its context. Don't vote to adopt it, you don't agree with its context. But if you do, and when you do, that is what governs. And that essentially alone. So that is why I say that the contention is incorrect as a matter of law. But separately and independently and cumulatively, it's incorrect as a matter of fact. And I say that because, as by way of example, if you go to the transcript of the August 15, 2024 proceedings, the last proceedings on this matter, and you look at pages 35 through several thereafter, you see a detailed discussion by Vice Chair Horowitz in particular, addressing the RSIS parking exemption and how, among other things, the proximity to the train does not do much, if anything, to warrant a parking stall deficiency variance or exception from the RSIS standards. And one can read, and if there's an appeal, a judge will read the responses or lack thereof by the applicant's witnesses. The applicant bears the burden of proof on all aspects of the relief sought. Additionally, if one were to go to page 79 of that same transcript, and for several pages therefore, would see, among others, Vice Chairman Horowitz addressing the concern with respect to the height in stories of the variance, many of which those same concerns and statements and questions and answers are reflected in the resolution, which is before you for adoption. Just going on by way of further example, by no means exhaustive, page 265 or several pages thereafter are the board's actual deliberations, in which, among other things, board member Simoff addressed traffic-related concerns, including specific concerns with respect to the site distance coming out of the driveway being short of what is required. Wherein Vice Chairman Horowitz referenced certain concerns, including with respect to the height. This building proposed to be the largest and tallest residential complex by far in the borough, for example. Traffic concerns expressed by Vice Chairman Horowitz. Public safety concerns, including construction-related concerns and questions unanswered, expressed by Vice Chairman Horowitz. Of course, I'm only going through the deliberations of those members who voted to deny, who would be voting to adopt the resolution this evening if they are here. Vice Chairman Horowitz addressing traffic queuing problems, traffic blocking on Mount Airy and Route 202. It's construction traffic, post-construction traffic, left-hand turn problems, and the like. Board Member Gardner, who also was a no vote, expressing concerns with the massive scale of the project directly related to the first prong of the negative criteria, expressing a concern that it would be substantially out of character with the neighborhood. Also expressing traffic concerns as well. Again, just by way of example, and Board Member Walden's deliberations as well reflected. So again, that's just some of the basis why, which if applicant's counsel insisted as he did, to put on the record his objection to the adoption of the resolution, it's incumbent upon me to express my contention with backup as to why it is both incorrect as a matter of law and incorrect as a matter of fact. So with that, I present to the board the modestly revised draft for consideration for adoption. Again, Vice Chair Horowitz, Board Member Simoff, Board Member Walden are qualified to vote on this resolution of denial. If and when ready, one would make a motion, one would second, and there'd be a roll call vote for those three. Does everybody understand?
Yes.
Okay.
I move that the resolution prepared for this meeting, the amendments discussed at this meeting be adopted by this board.
Also. Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. I know you know this, Denise, but, and Mr. Chairman, my apologies for the roll call vote.
Yes.
Sometimes when I get rolling, no pun intended, on a roll call vote, it's tough to stop.
Mr. Horowitz.
Yes.
Mr. Simoff
Yes.
and Mr. Walden.
Yes.
The motion carries.
And the bills.
No, that's right. The record reflect, Board Member DeMarco has rejoined.
I want to make a correction over the agenda. It has all the sitting members from.
Yes, it does.
All the members should be adjusted.
Right, thank you, Board Simoff, that you the only Simoff, Gardner, who's out, let's hear Walden and,
Yeah.
Yeah, I redid the agenda when I realized that in the copies that is here.
oh,
And I think Mr. DeMarco had one of those other members that talked out.
so it's already been amended, right?
Yes.
Thank you both.
Any discussion on any of the bills?
I'll move to pay the bills totaling $25,370.75.
Mr. DeMarco,
Yes.
Ms. Geller,
Yes.
Mr. Graham,
Yes.
Mr. Horowitz,
Yes.
Mr. Simoff,
Yes.
Mr. Walden,
Yes.
and Mr. Zazarino.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay. Public hearing, which is continuation of Equinet Properties LLC. This is at 55 Claremont Road at the corner of Mill Street. And it's sub area 6 of the Quimby Lane redevelopment zone. Block 71, lot 6, and its application SP. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. At the last meeting, some board members were here, some weren't. We presented a revised application where the original 8-unit building was reduced to 6 units. And therefore, the impervious coverage and the building coverage was improved by about 30% for each one. I have the exact numbers of building coverage is 24.9 and the impervious coverage was decreased by 27%. In the redevelopment plan, Equinet was named as a redeveloper of this property, and the density of this property was increased to 19 units per acre. This is about half an acre. And so the redevelopment plan allows us to build 8 units on this property. The problem is that the redevelopment plan did not modify the building coverage and the impervious coverage, and what exists on the property today and when we bought it was a single family home. So we can't comply with that regulation, and therefore we were asking for variances. We thought it unfair that the density was changed while the impervious coverage and the building coverage was not changed, which made it impossible to build 8 units. And it makes it impossible even to build 6 units without seeking variances. But unfortunately, that's our dilemma, and that's what we were stuck with, despite the fact that we petitioned the redevelopment board to please hear us and give us a meeting to discuss this, and we never got a response. Mr. Masucci, who is the principal of Equinet, unfortunately is undergoing surgery and can't be here tonight, but he was named as the redeveloper in this redevelopment, in the redevelopment agreement. So we reduced the building by 2 units, which reduced its bulk. The architecture and the layout of the building is substantially the same. And they're 2-floor townhouse units, 6 units. We are willing to give the easement at the rear of the property along Mine Brook for a trail which runs, unfortunately, to the wall of a fire, car wash. We're willing to do that. And during the pendency of the application, it was suggested that we meet with Mr. Brightly, Mr. Zabo, to discuss a walkway from Claremont down the side of the building to Mine Brook. And we agreed to do that. At the last hearing, Mr. Brightly suggested that the walkway be moved slightly to avoid it being a detriment to the property owner, the unit owners along that side of the building. We agreed to that. Mr. G. Migliano, who's been our engineer since the filing of this application, has basically agreed with 100% of Mr. Brightly's comments in his review letter. So we're willing to accept the terms of that. We're willing to give the easement along the side of the building to Mine Brook and the walkway. We're the only property in this zone that's not in the floodplain. All the other properties on Mine Brook that are in the redevelopment are in the floodplain. And I don't think, this is my personal opinion, not testifying, that they can't be built. This property is the only one. When we purchased this property, it was in the DCL zone. And we went before this board on a completed application. Both Mr. Zabo and Mr. Brightly agreed that it was in the DCL zone, and we conformed except for steep slopes. Halfway through that meeting, it was indicated, oh, wait a minute, this is in the redevelopment zone. And it's in the section 6, sub-area 6 of the redevelopment zone. And it came as news to us. We were unaware of that. Mr. Brightly was unaware of that. Mr. Zabo was unaware of that. We had no notice of that. We agreed to go back to the drawing board and do the redevelopment agreement to cooperate with the municipality. As far as I know, this is the only application for a use in the redevelopment zone today, and the redevelopment zone has been in existence for a while. So at the last meeting, some of you were here, we went through the modifications to the plans. It was pointed out some windows didn't match up with the elevations. We changed that. And now we like what Mitch McConnell calls an up and down vote. So that's it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, am I correct that the matter was concluded at the last hearing? And we're here because there was an insufficient quantity of time for a deliberation and vote?
Yes.
I think the only thing was there was public comment, general public comment.
Had not yet occurred.
Had not yet.
Okay, so, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate applicant's counsel making the proper and sort of maybe a precursor to a statement, a summation, maybe more than a preview of the summation. But if public comment has not yet been heard, then public comment, of course, should be heard. And then we can go through the deviation, relief, the conditions of approval, and the board can make its determination on this redevelopment plan site plan application.
Sure, thank you. Okay,
Can I correct some of the statements?
Counsel for the applicant, acceptable, accurate?
My name's Roy Kernels.
Mr. Curtis,
Yes.
acceptable?
It is.
Thank you. My name's Steve Moore.
I know who you are.
I know who you are as well. It's being formal.
correction for this or the letter?
No, his statement. He said that this is the only lot in the redevelopment portion, this portion of the redevelopment area that's not in the floodplain. That's not true. There are properties in front of Claremont, on the east side of Claremont.
Well, okay. I mean, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Simon, perspective, we should, it's time for public comment and then the board deliberation. If it's proper, this may or may not have been accurate, it can be addressed.
Okay.
Okay, so it's time for public comment on this. It's comment, meaning you can come down and you can be sworn and state your name and you can speak your mind on this application.
Hi there, need to be sworn in.
Yes, your name and address first?
Robert Wilson, 48 Shadowbrook Court. Great.
Or I have to get everybody's name and address correct, I'm not
Okay.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed.
Great. So I'm also the chairman of the Environmental Commission. I spoke here recently. So we've looked at this application and,
I'm sorry, but you're speaking as a member of the public now.
okay, fine.
Okay, it's part of the rules.
No worries.
I don't make them, I just have to.
All right, yeah, no, that's fine, that's fine. So, as a matter of fact, the comment's going to change. There is, zoning laws in place supported by the Environmental Commission that are largely, in this case, given the slope, given the brook behind the property, or abutting the property, in place for stormwater that we're looking at, that I look at as a private citizen. And we noticed while the density of the housing was reduced from 8x to 6x, the applicant appears to understand that that's impossible to meet without a variance. So, agreed. But I just wanted to, in case it wasn't obvious, bring it to the board's attention, the degree of by which the limit has been exceeded. So by the numbers that I got, was able to find on the public document and actually submitted to the paper as well. They're anywhere from 2 times to 8 times over the zoning limits. Again, I know you probably know that they're over, but didn't know if you understood exactly or had calculated exactly how far over. So for the steep slopes, for example, in the 15 to 25% range, they're about 2 times the limit. In the over the 30%, so the steepest part, they're over 8 times the limit. The zoning limit, that is. The footprint is about, for the total space covered by the development would be about 3 times, and covered by the building itself would be about 4 times what we wanted. So rather large excesses over the limit. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Again, and to quantify that for you, and I guess that's all I have to say. That's it. Okay.
You decide.
Thank you.
Sorry, David first.
Yes, Carrie Hazelton, 397 Brook Road, Bernardsville.
Raise your right hand, you swear to God or affirm testimony about gives the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please proceed.
Hi. First off, I want to thank this board for your considered and fair review of every application brought before you. I'm sure I'm not alone in my appreciation for the hours you all put in gratis in service to the borough and its master plan. Thank you. Quimby Village was supposed to be this grand project with all of these public amenities, including a public green space by the stream. And right now, the only thing we're seeing here with this application is a residential rental development that paves over a large portion of the only green space in the whole redevelopment area, removing almost all the existing trees. This is not the vision. This is not what we signed up for at the public meetings. This proposal undermines the goals of the zone plan and presents us with the peace offering of a set of steps to the back of the property. This amenity will not be used as it is just steps away from the main Mill Street intersection and its sidewalk. If approved, we will lose green space and we will have lost our way in pursuing the Quimby Village vision for the future of our downtown. Additionally, let me state the obvious. Lots are not created equal. Not every half-acre lot can support 8 units. This lot is environmentally constrained with impossibly steep slopes and a stream running along its border. It is subject to riparian zones and environmental protections, which are in place to protect both water quality and our neighbors downstream from flooding. All of this was factored into the price the applicant paid for the land. If it were more developable, he would have paid a much higher price for the lot. Now the applicant is claiming hardship because a barely developable lot is barely developable. That's not a hardship. I've seen this time and again with applicants. The applicant bought a constrained lot with limited potential. And as of today, he has submitted 2 plans which do not recognize that fact. The first was headed for denial by this board when the applicant pulled it so that he will not have to start over. The applicant should submit a plan that at least approximates what the lot can reasonably accommodate under the approved zone. This second overdeveloped iteration isn't even close, and therefore it should be done. Thank you.
Brad Wissinger, 81 Washington Corner Road. Good evening, everybody.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to God or affirm the testimony about the gives the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed.
This project's proximity to Mine Brook presents serious environmental concerns. I believe no disturbance, no structure, no man-made equipment like the Coltech stormwater chamber to be allowed within the 50-foot riparian zone. This is a pretty strong, definite rule. This property has serious slope issues, which this proposed project will potentially contribute to stormwater problems. Soil erosion, vegetation has been removed, flooding, and compromising the Mine Brook. This proposed project has significantly increased the impervious surface, which increases the risk of stormwater consequences mentioned above. I believe the plan for the borough redevelopment for a new development was not to exceed the original footprint being replaced. I understood that the borough downtown plan for new and redevelopment was to be environmentally sustainable. That's what it said. I think it is fair to question if this applies to this proposed project. Obviously, I do not. I have difficulty in accepting this project, even with the reduction of living units to 6. it will not put the that it will not put the environmental well-being of Bernardsville residents at risk. In my opinion, the pedestrian walkway does not compensate these significant environmental concerns. Thank you.
Yep. 51 Crestview Drive in Bernardsville.
Please raise your right hand. You swear to God or affirm that the testimony about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please proceed.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the board for its many months of work on this application and for the opportunity to speak about it tonight. I apologize for the length of my comments. This is an application to construct a 6-unit townhouse in sub-area 6 of the Quimby Lane redevelopment area. The applicant seeks various forms of deviation relief from the requirements of the QLRP and the municipal zoning code. I would only like to address 4 of these variances tonight. First, the applicant seeks a variance from the maximum coverage limitations of the QLRP. Mr. Wilson just laid those out, but I'll reiterate. 2,475 square feet of improved coverage is permissible under the QLRP. The applicant proposes 7,700 square feet of improved coverage, more than 3 times the permitted coverage. QLRP permits building coverage of 1,375 square feet, and the applicant proposes 5,205 square feet, or 3.78 times the permitted building coverage. Second, the applicant seeks a variance from the steep slope disturbance restrictions in the Bernardsville zoning code. In the 15 to 25% category, a maximum of 1,000 square feet is permitted, and 1,964 square feet of disturbance is proposed, almost twice as much as is allowed. The plan also proposes a steep slope disturbance that exceeds the permitted disturbance in the 30% or greater category, where a maximum of 250 square feet is permitted and 2,101 square feet of disturbance is proposed. And again, that's more than 8 times greater disturbance than is permitted. Third, the applicant seeks a variance from the sidewalk and streetscaping requirements of the QLRP. The QLRP requires 12 feet of sidewalk space running Claremont Road, made up of a 4-foot planting area and an unobstructed dedicated 8-foot pedestrian area. That's section 6.11 of the QLRP. The applicant proposes a 7-foot sidewalk with no planting area. Finally, the applicant seeks a variance from the Brook Park walkway requirements of the QLRP. QLRP states that development of sub-area 6 requires construction of 12-foot wide ADA compliant pathways paralleling the Brook. While the applicant's plans show a 4-foot wide wood chip path paralleling the Brook, it's my understanding of applicant's testimony that it does not intend to construct any such path. From these regulations, the applicant is seeking C1 or hardship variance relief, as well as C2 or flexible variance relief. It is the applicant's burden to establish its entitlement to variance relief under these standards by clear and competent evidence. I respectfully submit that the applicant has not satisfied its burden in the site plan application before the board. First, C1 hardship relief is unwarranted. Under New Jersey law, hardship variances can be granted only based on the unique condition of the property and its unsuitability for development under the generally applicable regulations in its zoning district. The focus is whether strict enforcement of the ordinance would cause undue hardship because of the unique or exceptional conditions of the specific property vis-a-vis the rest of the zone. So the board's inquiry should begin by comparing this property to others within the QLRA sub-area 6. As set forth in QLRP section 6.7, development within this area, sub-area is, quote, highly restricted by environmental conditions. Specifically, the sub-area's eastern side is almost entirely within the Brook floodplain, and the topology of the western portion is comprised extensively by steep slopes. For that reason, the QLRP, quote, envisions sub-area 6 primarily as open space with development limited to the reuse of existing structures or building footprints and the creation of new open space, unquote. There is absolutely nothing unique about the physical condition of this property as compared to the others within sub-area 6 that makes the development of the property a unique hardship. Indeed, Mr. Kernos correctly points out that this particular property is the largest within the sub-area with the least amount of land within the floodplain. Therefore, there exists no unique or exceptional physical conditions of this property that would limit development that are not shared by all other properties in the sub-area 6 zoning district. The only alleged hardship is that the existing zoning regulations prohibit this developer from building a non-conforming overlarge townhouse development far beyond what is permitted in the sub-area. As stated earlier, the site plan application calls for coverages 3 times greater than the maximum allowed under the QLRP. Simply because an applicant wishes to build beyond the limits of the zoning ordinance, or that it could make more money by exceeding the relevant construction limitations, does not constitute a hardship under subsection C1. In fact, our state Supreme Court has clearly held that in a C1 variance context, a land use board must distinguish between a true hardship caused by a unique condition of the property and a situation where the size of the structure proposed creates the impetus for a variance. Only in the former case is C1 hardship relief appropriate. This site plan application falls squarely into the category of excessive size, unrelated to unique physical condition of the property, and therefore hardship relief from the maximum coverage limitations is not warranted. The same holds true for the steep slope variance relief under C1. As already stated, the entire west side of sub-area 6 is characterized by steep slopes, and the rest of the sub-area is subject to similar environmental development constraints. There is nothing unique with respect to this property. Moreover, I would respectfully submit that hardship relief from the zoning ordinance that is specifically directed at physical conditions of property that are claimed to be a hardship would be improper. If anyone could obtain relief from a steep slope ordinance by coming to the board and saying, I have a hardship because my property has a lot of steep slopes, it would completely nullify the purpose and effect of the ordinance. Further, it would result in the absurd outcome that properties containing the greatest amount of steep slopes, and which are therefore least suitable for development, would actually have the greatest chance of obtaining hardship relief. This interpretation should not be adopted by this board. As stated above, there's nothing unique about the steep slopes of this property vis-a-vis the others from sub-area 6, and therefore C1 relief should not be granted. A hardship variance for the QLRP sidewalk and streetscaping standards is also not appropriate. The applicant claims that it cannot comply with the requirement for a planting area along Claremont Road because the county does not want street trees blocking the line of sight down the street. That is the case, and the solution should be to plant flower beds or other low-growing shrubs, not to entirely eliminate the planting area and cut off 1 foot from the 8-foot sidewalk requirement. The plans shown make it clear that the entire 12-foot sidewalk and streetscaping could be provided if the development was confined to the existing building footprint as required by the zone. It is only the immense size of this development that creates the applicant's desire to violate those mandates. Similarly, there is no justification for hardship relief from the Brook Park walkway requirements in subsection 6. The applicant is, section 6.11 provides a public pathway at 12-foot wide along the Brook watercourse shall be provided. The exception to the width requirement shall be any instance in which the site conditions prohibit placement along the brook. If the pathway cannot run adjacent to the brook, a parallel pathway should be provided. All pathways shall conform to current ADA standards. The applicant is not seeking a variance to build an ADA conforming pathway of a smaller width than 12 feet due to the physical conditions of the property. Rather, it intends to build no pathway at all, because to do so would be financially burdensome. As this board is well aware, the financial implications to the applicant of complying with the zoning ordinance do not meet the municipal land use law definition of a hardship. There is no physical condition of this property prohibiting a wide ADA compliant pathway to be constructed parallel to the Brook over the eastern part of this property, if development was properly confined to the building footprint. Again, it is only the oversized nature of the development that does not allow for a 12-foot Brook pathway as envisioned by the QLRP. I would also submit to the board that flexible or C2 variance relief is inappropriate. Under the municipal land use law, C2 variance requires a balancing of positive criteria of granting a variance against the negative criteria resulting from a developer's non-conformance with the zoning law. The positive criteria focus on whether the variance represents a better alternative for the property in terms of public benefit and furthering the municipal zoning plan than what is allowed under the existing regulations. Importantly, the question is not whether the development application would represent an improvement over the existing state of the property without any development. The question is, does the applicant's plan with variance relief better serve the community's needs and our borough zoning plan than would a development application that conforms with the council's specific zoning for this property? Again, the applicant has a responsibility of supplying competent and credible evidence establishing these positive criteria. I respectfully submit that no competent and credible evidence satisfying the positive criteria for C2 variance relief has been provided. The only testimony concerning the positive criteria of this development was presented by the planning professionals hired by the applicant. They presented testimony focusing solely on the generic reported benefits of locating residential housing near a commercial downtown. The planners speculate that bringing 12 or so people that this development will accommodate to the downtown area will stimulate the local economy. Even assuming that the planners are correct about these conclusions, this testimony does not address the relevant question for C2 variance purposes, whether the alleged benefits of a non-conforming development create a better outcome than would a conforming development. The applicant's expert planner testified that a smaller townhome development on the existing building footprint would be permitted on the QLRP. Additionally, other permitted uses in sub-area 6 include mixed-use housing and commercial space, restaurants, coffee shops, cafes, retail, artisan manufacturing, fitness centers, art galleries, and co-working space, among other things. No testimony, let alone competent and credible testimony, was presented as to why a non-conforming overbuilt townhome development provides more benefits to the community or better serves our zoning plan than a conforming townhome, retail, restaurant, or other use. As no such testimony was presented, the applicant has failed to meet its burden of proof in the positive criteria. Even assuming for the sake of argument, the positive criteria can be satisfied simply by showing that a development adds residential rental housing, the application here cannot withstand examination under the C2 negative criteria analysis. Under this test, an applicant must show that the purported benefit of granting variance relief would substantially outweigh any detriment that the variance would create. While the alleged benefits of this development are speculative at best, the detriments to the community and the Quimby Lane zoning plan that these variances would create are manifold and manifest. QLRP Section 5 sets forth the public purposes, goals, and objectives of the redevelopment plan. Among these are to create a pedestrian-friendly atmosphere by incorporating pedestrian-oriented street elements that can improve safety and create a more attractive streetscape. Provide a network of pathways that connect buildings and spaces and link the redevelopment area to the neighborhood surrounding it. Create public spaces that provide a central gathering location for all Bernardsville residents, including a public park that enhances the Mine Brook. This Mine Brook Park would create areas for seating and passive recreation along the waterside with pedestrian connections along the waterway and between the park and Claremont Road, Mill Street, and Mine Brook Road. Toward that end, the QLRP envisions sub-area 6 primarily as open space with development limited to the reuse of existing structures or building footprints and the creation of new open space. Granting the applicant the variance relief requested would be extremely inimical to the goals of our zoning code and the QLRP. First, as stated clearly by our borough's environmental commission in their reports to this board, there will be serious negative environmental impacts of the extensive steep slope disturbance proposed here. I do not have the commission's expertise and experience, so I will not try to expand upon the report provided, but I would note that the steep slope ordinance codifies the conservation element of our municipal master plan, which states that, quote, as a general guide, where slopes exceed 15%, only very low densities are tolerable, and there should be no building on slopes above 25%. Therefore, this application is not simply seeking relief from zoning regulation. It is seeking to build in a way that directly contradicts the conservation element of our master plan with potentially profound negative environmental impacts. The proposed development not only massively disturbs steep slopes, but also paves over a substantial portion of what is essentially the only existing remaining green space in the entire sub-area 6, as Ms. Hazelton points out. It fails to provide the ADA compliant walking path envisioned for the Mine Brook Park, and therefore eliminates rather than expands green space and cuts off the possibility of zoning compliant pedestrian walkways. It therefore drastically undermines the goals of the QLRP and eliminates the public benefits that were such a major incentive for the entire Quimby Lane redevelopment project that was promoted and sold to the public. As Mr. Zabel stated at an earlier meeting on this application, if we're going to permit piecemeal development of the Quimby Lane redevelopment area, it must be done in strict compliance with the standards set forth in the QLRP, or we will quickly lose the cohesive vision that plan lays out. Nowhere can this be seen more clearly than in the sidewalk and streetscaping variances sought here. If these variances are granted, this board will essentially be baking in substandard sidewalk and walkway width to the entire Claremont Road frontage, as each and every other development in the QLRA will seek variance relief to reduce the sidewalks to the same level as the applicant seeks to deliver here. So simply because this one applicant does not wish to comply with the QLRP's regulations, no development along the sub-area will. In sum, I respectfully submit that the applicant has not met its burden of proof on C2 variance relief. It has produced no competent and credible evidence that the non-conforming development provides any advantage over conforming development, let alone that any speculative benefits substantially outweigh the very clear detriments that variance relief will produce. As such, the site plan application should be denied. I know I've been talking for a long time and I apologize, but I also would like to raise a concern over how the applicant proposes to make its affordable housing requirements here. I know every time, in the past, affordable housing has come up, this board is told that it's a council issue and outside your jurisdiction, but I would like, to push back on that some. This board is statutorily obligated under municipal land use law to enforce the municipal zoning code as it exists at the time of the borough board's decision on site plan application. I would submit that this includes any borough ordinance pertaining to affordable housing. The applicant's attorney stated at the last meeting that its plan was to satisfy the affordability requirements through a payment in lieu to be negotiated with the borough at a later date. To me, this violates section 5.2 of the QLRP, which explicitly provides that for developments with a residential component, a minimum of 15% of units shall be set aside as affordable units on site. Added to that requirement is the fact that this lot is part of the AH03 Affordable Overlay Zone, as is shown on page 11, figure 3 of the QLRP. This was an overlay zoning district created by the borough in compliance with the settlement agreement with the Fair Share Housing Center, a part of its Round 3 Mount Laurel obligation. The adoption of the ordinance creating the zone was specifically recognized as a material provision of the Fair Share Settlement Agreement, was reviewed by this board and incorporated into the borough's affordable housing element of the master plan, and was a condition precedent for entry of the final judgment of repose, insulating the borough from exclusionary zoning builder's remedy lawsuits. As stated earlier, the QLRP expressly recognizes that the AH03 overlay zone applies to a portion of the lot in sub-area 6, including this lot. The QLRP does not purport to repeal, amend, or invalidate this overlay zone, which would obviously run afoul of the borough's obligations under its settlement agreement and judgment of repose. Rather, the QLRP notes, trying to find a site for that, I believe it's 5.2 again. QLRP notes that development within the existing AH03 zone is expected to be severely limited by flood hazard regulations. It is anticipated that a minimum of 80 residential units will be created in implementation of this plan by developing mixed-use apartments on the east side of the Quimby Lane area, fulfilling the 12-unit affordable housing requirement currently required on the AH03 zone. So essentially it says, when and if there's going to be a development of the Quimby Lane redevelopment area, it will include at least 12 affordable units, and Fair Share will get what they bargained for. So no harm, no foul, which makes total sense if it is done in the way that the plan envisions, as part of a single large development of the entire area which delivered the required affordable housing. But here again is the problem with piecemeal development. You have no application before you for development on the east side of Quimby that would deliver the promised units. The Quimby project is currently moribund, and we've been hearing for months from our council that development plans for Quimby are to be significantly scaled back. So all you have is an application to develop a lot in the AH03 zone. And again, the largest lot in the zone and the one that is least floodplain restricted. And the applicant seeks to build all market rate construction without providing any affordable and without any assurances that the affordable units that are zoned to be built there will be generated elsewhere in Quimby. I fear that if this board allows the development to proceed under these circumstances, Fair Share could take the position that we're in violation of our obligations under the settlement agreement, possibly jeopardizing the borough's judgment of repose and builder's remedy lawsuits. Finally, I'd like to point out something I discovered recently researching the borough's current application for Highlands Plan Conformance. NJSA 52:27D-329.9, a provision of the Fair Housing Act, provides that for developments consisting of newly constructed residential units located within the jurisdiction of any regional planning entity, including the Highlands Council, there shall be required to be reserved for occupancy by low or moderate income households at least 20% of the residential units constructed to the extent this is economically feasible. This development, like all of Bernardsville, is within the Highlands region and therefore subject to this 20% set aside requirement. No competent and credible testimony has been presented by the applicant that it is not economically feasible to provide 2 affordable units within the 6-unit development as required by the FHA's 20% set aside requirement for developments in the Highland region. In sum, I respectfully submit that the applicant has not satisfied its burden of establishing its entitled to variance relief under the municipal land use law, and that the applicant's proposal to develop this lot without providing affordable housing violates our zoning code, our contractual obligations to Fair Share included in the judgment of repose, and the Fair Housing Act. As such, it should be denied. Thank you, and I apologize again for my comments.
Lisa, do you want a copy of his? Would that be helpful or no?
Yeah.
Is that possible?
The applicant's counsel, do you have any objection to the written version that's being submitted? Or would you insist that we merely have it reflected on the tape?
On the record.
Okay.
On record? Okay. Right, so in other words, you object to the submission of the document, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why I asked. It's okay.
Yes.
Thank you as well for listening to Aaron for. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. We're this your name, address?
Redland. 211 Claremont.
You swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please proceed.
Thank you. Start with, thank you very much for your time, energy, especially those of you who had watched the tapes to be able to vote tonight. It's much appreciated. Want to bring a few things to light. The current lot has steep slopes that are stable. They absorb the rain that comes there. Testimony has discussed, or questions have discussed, what happens with the rain that falls on that property. Essentially, it goes into the ground on the property. It does not go into the brook because there is sufficient open space and understudy. So it's not contributing. With the development, there is going to be increased water going in. And that is one of my major concerns, is the Coltech stormwater chamber being placed in the riparian zone. It is your decision to permit that. It has not been permitted by any other authority. It is an exception, and it would infringe, I feel, on the neighbors downstream. The flooding that happens at 202 is significant. When that water goes over into the lower level of the Station Tavern on a regular basis, it freezes up in the parking lot of the train station. On the other side, it floods into the nail salon, Golden Flower, on a regular basis. That is because we have such a volume coming through. Increasing this would happen with development of this property and including the infiltration chamber in a riparian zone where some of this water really needs to be absorbed. Okay, on another issue that bothers me a great deal, the parking places in front of this unit on Claremont Road. There are 11 of them that are public parking places that are limited hours up until 6 p.m. Right now, there are 11 places. 5 cars were in there as I drove past. People attending the movies, theater, dinner. That's normal use there. Unfortunately, the police don't have time during the day to police those, but they are about the same, if not all filled, at lunchtime when people are also eating, stopping to get a bite, and maybe visiting their friends. It is the only parking for the rug store around the corner on Mill Street. They have no other parking. If the residents choose to park in front of these 6 units, they could be using up spaces and providing no additional spaces for residents who want to enjoy their town. So I really have a problem with the decision that the developer has said with hardship to accommodate the size of their building, the number of parking, etc., that they are choosing not to put stairwells under the building up to the units. I think this would be advantageous for the residents, neighbors who want to use it. Also, it would increase the structural stability of the building by increasing the footprint. It would provide storage potentially under those stairwells also for some of the garbage and recycling that seems to be quite an issue. So those are my concerns with regards to parking, stormwater, and our residents of Bernardsville who should not have to bear the hardship of overdevelopment.
Wait, can I ask a question?
Yeah, you can ask.
Did you have an opportunity to see the stormwater calculations?
That original one, I don't know if there's been a modified one.
No, this is what was last revised September 26, 2024.
Okay, haven't seen the September 2024 one, no.
Denise, that is, if I may, Mr. Chairman, that is part of the public record.
Yes, I did.
Okay, do you happen to know offhand whether it's on the website or not?
I can check.
Not that it's required to be, it's public record, but it's a benefit if it also is.
We received it October 11.
And I apologize for putting you on the spot.
No, that's okay. I will,
We can move on and find the answer.
Any more comments from the public?
Mr. Chair, there's no more public comment in fairness to applicants and applicants' counsel. Applicants' counsel should always be afforded the opportunity to provide summation at the conclusion after public comment. So certainly, Mr. Kernos, should be afforded the same as long as he reasonably cares to. I did, while he's approaching, did want to remind everyone that it's my understanding, and Denise, please correct me if I'm wrong, that with all the certifications I signed or notarized this evening, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all 7 members on the, no, 6, 2,
Mr. Golden.
4, 6, my apologies. All 6 board members on the big, at the adult days are qualified to vote this evening on this application, so that Mr. Kurnos knows, in fairness to the board members, who will be presumably voting shortly. And with respect to the affordable housing contention made by Mr. Duff, certainly Mr. Kurnos, to the extent in which he will do so in summation, can address that among other things.
And I just, before we start, Mr. Colonel, I just verified, it is on the website.
On the website.
The entire resubmission, from that time was posted on the system.
Confirm that as well. Thank you.
Well, I tried jury cases and I tried bench cases before the judge. And I always was told by my mentor, a great trial lawyer, that most of you have already concluded how you're going to vote. So I don't want to bore you with a lengthy summation. With regard to the fair share housing issue, we worked out a number with Mr. Pigeon, who's a fine attorney, with respect to a payment in lieu. It's my position that this board doesn't have any jurisdiction to challenge that. It was my understanding that it was in the borough's best interest at that time that cash infusion was a benefit to the borough. The payment in lieu, based on 8 units, was $243,535. And it was placed in the redevelopment agreement, so it's part of the redevelopment agreement. That number obviously will change. We're now in another stage with fair share housing. I represent a couple of municipalities. It's the same cat fight that existed in the other 3 rounds. So as I understand it, the borough received a favorable number, but that's a different issue. I just do not believe it has anything to do with this board. That number was worked out because the number of units have been reduced. That number will be reduced. With respect to the stream, it was mentioned that it is not ADA compliant. And that's true because it's in the floodplain and it can't be. At the last hearing, if you recall, there was discussions that we own property to the east of the stream, on the other side of the stream. And it was generally thought that that's the better place to put this walkway. And so we're still willing to give land to the east of the stream as well as to the west of the stream. But because it's in the floodplain, it can't be ADA compliant, just like Grand Canyon can't be ADA compliant either. In terms of the steep slopes, if you recall, and this testimony was not refuted by Mr. Brightly, our engineer testified that the foundation walls of this building would correct the erosion problems that the steep slopes ordinances are supposed to direct. So he testified that these were man-made slopes And when the home was built and it was filled in for the roadway for Claremont Road. So the steep slopes question as to erosion was taken off the table. And Mr. Brightly did not, in his report, make any mention that the sleeps, how we addressed the slopes was not correct, and there would be erosion. There's no erosion. Both engineers agree with that. So that's not an issue. With respect to stormwater, the stormwater system was designed by a very competent engineer. It passed the DEP, who are very difficult to work with, and we got approval for it. Mr. Brightly reviewed it. There's nothing in any of his reports that challenges that these slopes, the drainage, will have any effect on Mine Brook. We have 2 certified engineers, licensed engineers, both through their reports testifying to that fact. So whether somebody believes it may be true, water runs downhill, this is going to be a problem, is taken off the table because we have professional licensed engineers addressing that issue. I don't have much more to say in terms of, the sidewalk issue. We designed street trees, a wider sidewalk, plantings, and the county came along and said, sight distance problems, you can't do it. You gotta, the sidewalk has to be this size. And so we don't have any control over the county, and any developer that comes in to develop this problem is gonna have the same issue. They're gonna have to deal with the county. Other than that, I leave it up to you to vote.
Right. Parking, we beat RSIS. A woman indicated that our people need.
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to speak
There was a
little quieter.
There was an RSIS question, which we disagree with. I don't want to belabor that point.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
But essentially, what you're saying is that you believe the RSS guidance or whatever, that your proposal is adequate to handle the demand from the residents, that there's no mandatory reason for them to go out to the front.
Right.
Maybe loading and unloading.
Yeah, and we have an elevator. I mean,
That kind of
testimony, I didn't think that was a.
You don't have a shortage of parking that you feel has to overflow. You're not saying you're under delivering parking so that people would have to seek
Right.
off-site parking, which would be in the front of your building.
Right, we have plenty of parking.
Yeah, okay. I think that's what you meant, right?
One other thing for me, I do recall a discussion about, the county's opinions on trees in the front of the property. What specifically was it that they said about the width of the sidewalk?
They limited I wasn't party, Mark, could you address that?
Well, you know what, before,
Maybe
in lieu of reopening the hearing, perhaps you can consult with your engineer and make a proffer to the board to answer.
Yeah, this is amazing. I don't testify.
Sazarino's question succinctly.
Yeah, we're gonna discuss. We're gonna. No, we would be doing it now and you would run into the same question.
I'm saying that the county only impacted the plantings for the site distance, not the width of sidewalk.
Not the width of the sidewalk. Okay, I just want to. Okay.
Thank you for that clarification.
So I rest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you need to say anything before the next, before our?
Between neither or should. Certainly I'll tee it up for the board as always.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a discussion. Do you want to, we have a lot to talk about. The point is, do you want to review the SWOT?
That's what I meant. I just quickly review the relief and the conditions.
Okay.
But I do want to say one thing briefly, and that is that to the extent affordable housing component of this project has been raised. Putting aside the reasons why Mr. Kurnos disagrees with Mr. Duff's contention. Mr. Duff's contention, I suspect, is incorrect. And just generally what I would say is that while Mr. Pigeon is the town attorney and is handling the affordable housing third round and fourth round coming up now for our municipality, for our borough. My understanding is that we are fully compliant with the judgment of compliance here opposed to our third round obligation, that this was part of the redevelopment agreement. So it's more than my strong suspicion that indeed that is not a consideration for this board with respect to this application.
And Highlands, the expanded Highlands aspect was more of a heads up, essentially. Because we're not,
fourth round's coming. What happens in the fourth round will happen in the fourth round.
okay.
When it's simple in affordable housing law. If you're fully compliant, you're fully compliant until you're not. We're fully compliant is my understanding. With our third round obligation, there is no fourth round obligation. Technically, yet it starts July 1, albeit it's a prepackaged process this time around for the fourth round. The relief sought, again, this is the Quimby Lane redevelopment plan, sub area 6. That was, as I understand it, accurately stated by Mr. Kurnos to have been, I believe it was in 2022, amended with respect to, with the knowledge by the governing body of this project. The project, it's a preliminary and final site plan to construct 6-unit townhouse development. As was stated, the amendment as fall of the sub area 6 redevelopment plan included increasing the density to 19 to the acre, which would afford an opportunity to build 8 townhouses, whereas now the density sought is 6 townhouses, 14 to the acre, obviously lower than the 19 permitted by the amendment. But nevertheless, as was pointed out, there are deviations that remain for the board to consider in connection with the preliminary and final site plan to construct a reduced number of 6 units townhouse development. That is, the building coverage and the impervious coverage were reduced by about 25 to 30% each. The building coverage is reduced to 5,205 square feet, but is still in excess of the 1,375 square feet that exists presently. If I recall correctly, the redevelopment plan sets the sub area sets the maximum as what presently exists, single family home. And the same with the impervious coverage. The proposed is 7,375 square feet, reduced from what previously was proposed at 8 townhouses, but again, more than the 2,475 square feet of impervious coverage. And presently, bear with me, with the single family home that is there. Maybe you can explain it to Mr. Kurnos so he can make it as a proper without reopening testimony.
Impervious coverage is 7,700 square feet based on to incorporate the changes Mr. Brightly recommended.
Okay, so the impervious coverage has been increased, Mr. Kurnos is telling us, to 7,700 square feet. But the building coverage, Mr. Kurnos, is remaining at 5,200 square feet. Okay, thank you. So technically the deviation has gone back up a little bit. I want to say a little bit, has gone back up from 7,375 to 7,700. That increase being apparently fulfilled to Mr. Brightly's recommendation. Is that correct, Mr. Brightly?
If that's shifting the steps away from the building so that they're not up against the side of the building and then creating a connecting walkway. I think maybe even extending that a little bit so that they actually take the grade. If that's not allowed to that's like to at the November meeting.
Yeah, I appreciate that candid confirmation from applicant's counsel, as well as Mr. Brightly's confirmation of his understanding that 325 square foot additional impervious coverage was effectively, if not actually at the recommendation of our board engineer. So in addition to the building coverage and impervious coverage deviations, there is still a deviation required for permitting vehicle access from Mill Street versus the primary access coming from either Claremont or Quimby, which remains a standard for the sub area as a whole, as I recall. And again, the steep slope disturbances, as stated, 15 to 25% category, 1949 square feet versus 1,000 square foot maximum permitted, and for the greater than 30% category of steep slopes, 1954 square feet versus 250 square feet permitted. I believe there technically still is also a waiver for no on-site loading space. It's proposed from Claremont Road, again, that being a standard, I believe, for the entire sub area. And there may technically still be the de minimis size exemption for above ground utilities, overhead electrical service, as opposed to the general requirement that everything be below ground. That's something we've come across many times in the past. They won't always put the electric on the joint, you know. That's the relief sought. Sorry. The condition, I'm sorry? Sidewalk. Oh, and well, is there now a sidewalk deviation that part of the
The QRP deviation.
Yeah, the requirement in the front, the width of the
The
sidewalk.
width of the sidewalk as well, my apologies, that I guess came up since the last. If that is all the relief sought, the conditions of approval, all those stipulated to by or on behalf of the applicant, including no storage of recycling or garbage on Claremont, compliance with the engineering review memoranda, comments and conditions, curing inconsistencies between the architectural floor plans and the elevation plans, favoring the elevation plans, pickup trucks to remove waste and recycling, private waste and recycling removal, the easement, or deed restrict dedication, subject to the borough, which it prefers, for the installment of the walking path from Mill Street to the river, and the relocation of that walkway for Mr. Wrightley's recommendations, and compliance with the planning support. And the affordable housing obligations, again, generally outside of the jurisdiction of the board, but the condition is that there will remain an obligation and it may be modified vis-a-vis the modification of the proposal, that's to be determined by the borough, that is not within the purview of the plan.
There was one other aspect that our recommendation that increased the impervious coverage. There's, the current plan showed 4 parking spaces, uncovered parking spaces in the parking garage, and we had made a recommendation that we go back to the 5 that was originally proposed, due to the constraints of the loading area and the 88 parking space and the stairwell and the elevator. Kind of, there's a lot going on in there. So we have to agree to go back to the 5 uncovered parking spaces.
What was that part and parcel, the additional 325 square feet going from 7375 to 7700?
And it wasn't just moving these steps.
So that's just further clarification for the board as to the specific recommendations by Mr. Brightly, increasing the impervious coverage back up to 7,700 square feet. I believe we've covered the relief requested and the conditions of approval and confirmed our 6 board members, not 7, who are qualified to vote. Before the board deliberates, I wish to advise that while board member Walden is not disqualified from a conflict perspective, it's my opinion that he should not engage in deliberation with respect to the application, since he is not qualified to vote on the application this evening. Maybe the height of the chairs actually has some bearing this evening, in an odd sort of way.
I have some questions. The DEP approvals, do they have a time limit? I know the wetlands, and then,
Well, outside approvals, I mean, are outside approvals, they're subject to the.
well, the reason I'm asking is, the walkway is within the DEP regulated area. If it's not built within the permit limits of the permit time limits, what happens?
Again, the board's, if there's an approval, the board's approval is conditioned on, among other things, all outside agencies and whatever happens subsequent there too, because it is up to those agencies to make those determinations and
No, but we're approving something that may not be continued.
I think we heard from the engineer, it's feasible, and that's all that it needs to be for the board.
No, it's more than that, Steve. No, the question has kind of come up of whether they're gonna build anything on the west side of the river at all. Now, they've agreed to easement, but then there's a question of are they doing anything with it? Or are they just giving the town the easement and the town's gonna figure out what to do within the easement? So it is important that if we're gonna say, well, you need to put something there, we want a whatever size wood trail or something, it's important that we
If
state
you're
that.
gonna consider conditions beyond those stipulated to?
Well, no, that's stipulated.
Right.
Okay, the point is, but then it was withdrawn.
Well, it's on the plans.
Yeah.
It's on the plan without conditions.
Yeah, but the site plan is what you are considering for approval with those conditions.
Well, then it's important
If
that
it
we're
ends
not-
up deviating, they may have to come back.
No, then it's important that we keep that, we are not deleting that from the site plan.
I mean, that was discussed at the November meeting. but
Right.
It wasn't, I understand was, or wasn't gonna require the 3 foot wide pad.
But the plan shows it and
But
the
it is
plan
on
shows
the plan and it
without
shows it.
condition.
And there's a 6 foot wide mulch pad from steps to
Right.
this 3 foot.
Right.
So are you asking if the plan is effectively modified by?
Right,
the
I'm wondering
stipulations?
whether there is a modification or there's not a
I
modification.
would imagine, and applicant's counsel, correct me if I'm wrong, that if this is approved, he will coordinate to have his engineer modify the site plans accordingly.
To remove.
As a conditional of removal, if the board's determination is based on it being a 3 foot sidewalk, then it would be modified.
The thing is that we're only talking about the 3 foot mulch pad, not the steps. They're still gonna be done.
Yeah, steps will still, the big steps, the ones. from-
Perpendicular to Claremont.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely, no, this is just about the path that's along, because we talked about it, just about the path along the brook. And you're saying that's on the plan,
It's on the
it's on
plan
the
now.
plan as how wide,
3 foot
3 feet,
parallel.
right,
stream,
so that's all
6 foot
consistent.
Connecting to the steps.
So then there's just a question of are we voting on that? As the plan said, we're voting to keep the path. Essentially, we're not voting to absolve them from implementing the path.
You're voting on what they're asking you to vote on. So maybe.
Well, we had other discussions.
Maybe council can
I was under
confirm what he's requesting you to approve.
I was in the impression that we stipulated to that path.
Okay,
And we also stipulated that in the event it turned out that the path on the other side of the stream, I think that's east,
that is correct.
okay, that we would give that land up as well for an easement. And
Right.
that was a stipulation that was made,
Okay,
because
I
there's
just
some
wanted to be
testimony that
clear,
the,
that's all.
that the other side of the stream was a better place for the path.
Right.
So what do you plan to build with this project?
Pardon me?
What do you plan to build with this project?
What's on the plan?
So the 3 foot wide path
Right,
on the west side of the stream would be built.
Right,
right, with the understanding, and if the resolution is passed, that in the event the borough wants an easement or the land on the east side of the stream, we would give it up.
In addition to,
So that's
In
on-
addition to,
that's shown
okay,
in
so that-
the easement.
Yeah,
that, we don't care.
that's already in part of the easement.
There's an easement shown now that encompasses that
Everything from,
little strip of area that's.
right.
So just so I'm clear, right, if approved, project's done, I would go by there and I would see a path that would run between the stream and your parking space on the high side, because I hate east and west.
Yes.
Okay.
And as
That-
part of the project, that tracks back to your question about DP expiration, things like that, right?
Well,
And I think the
They have
answer
to
to
do it
that,
before the
I
agreement expires.
think the answer to that would be his approval also has a time limit.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't get the DEP approval and that expires, he would have to come back and ask for an extension.
And
It's
his
more-
extension
The
opportunity
risk is on him, because he can't do anything until he gets the DEP.
The idea was the magnitude of the risk. It's, we're confident if he gets the approval, he's gonna build the building in the time frame that DEP allows. It's a question of, will he also do the path in the same time frame, or is that going to be lagged in a point where it would, the DEP permit would expire? And it sounds like,
Yeah.
4 years.
it's his risk.
We have
Right,
the
it's not-
approval for 4 years. 4 more years.
right, so the DEP approval goes for another 4 years. And so the path has to be built within the next 4 years. Yeah. Okay.
But you can,
I,
as a condition, he has to build the path. So if he builds the building, and never builds the path, I don't know how we get to CO.
okay, no, because I listened to the tape.
Yeah.
And it wasn't clear.
He cleared it up a little bit left. A little bit.
Okay,
Not crystal, but a little bit.
and
And then, maybe, I know that the county is rejected landscaping. But perhaps our landscape architect, can help us out in giving trees that have a high, high, that they provide a low clearance under the branches for the, in the sight lines, because the plan shows sight lines. And I know that utilities are exempt from sight distance by ASHTO, so maybe the same size.
I was pretty sure county rejected that county does not consider a high canopy to be an exception to the sight line. That they would not allow, because we asked that in the Essex house, the Essex parking lot, they said, no, you can't put a tree there with a high canopy.
All right,
But you can check it out, but
and then another question I had after. listening
creative
to
ideas.
this, maybe perhaps this is a minor drainage application, right, Bob?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have TSS removal,
It's not a requirement in the ordinance.
that
They
perhaps,
do have an individual permit, and they do have a GP11 to put the discharge in the stream, so it has gone to DEP. They've addressed most of our comments, a few remaining comments, but it is minor, so there's no.
no requirement for TSS. That perhaps in return, an offset for granting the variances for disturbance, we add TSS removal from the parking lot.
To what degree? Are you suggesting?
80%.
Okay, because nowadays it's moving up, isn't it?
No, I'm just saying that might be an offset to the
Yeah,
variance.
so you're saying 80%, TSS removal, and,
Just the parking area,
Is it not for the parking?
not, the roof drains are exempt. Roof run.
Are you asking the applicant if that is a condition they'd be going to stipulate to all the other?
Well,
all the other
I'm putting it
conditions?
forward to Bob.
Well, that's actually,
Are you talking about the uncovered parking area, the entire parking garage?
Well, perhaps the entire, because you still have you have suspended solids underneath it.
you're first asking, or
If it's a
borough
reasonable,
engineer, that might be a good idea.
offset to the variance.
It would need to be a mechanical device, so.
Yeah. And I'm putting out for discussion with the board.
It's so great a consideration as option. That's what is. You should keep that in mind.
If it was a major, the TSS would be required. Total suspended solids. It's grit and stuff that falls on the pavement is picked up mechanically in the wall. That if it's a minor, TSS is not required, the major does.
Council, is that an issue?
I'm sorry, but
We're not asking them to
Board
concede.
members,
Just wanna know if-
Mark, I thought maybe we should find out if our engineer thinks it's a good idea. And then ask the applicant if the applicant.
Well, is it helpful? I guess
Helpful, what
basically you
happened?
can,
Obviously, it's helpful in terms of stormwater, but it's not, like I said, not in the ordinance.
right.
It's not gonna be a green infrastructure device, it's just gonna be a mechanical unit.
Right. Its degree of helpfulness. Okay, what does it mitigate, in terms of conceptual?
Most of this impervious surface is
Under.
roof area. There is a driveway that can be connected into it. So, it is picking up. Paved area, so you're gonna collect something.
It's probably gonna pick up what gets dragged in on that driveway, right? The driveway is not under the roof, right?
Driveway's not under the roof. Added 5 parking spaces.
Right.
Concern environmentally, if you suspended solids, that requiring that would.
Like I mentioned, they did receive a individual permit. I'm sorry, they received an individual permit from the DEP. And they received a stormwater outfall permit from the DEP. They're a higher authority. And it wasn't required by the DEP.
But in your opinion, is there a substantial amount of junk that can get washed in, or this requirement will prevent from getting into the groundwater?
It's a relatively small area when you compare the overall impervious, but they are over their allowed coverage. So if the board feels that that's, an important trade-off.
It's a trade-off against impervious.
Against impervious, soil disturbance, yes, so it's
To some degree.
not a bad thing to have.
Yeah.
Whether,
The material, my real question is the material.
generally, we review these things, it's not in the ordinance. So never do.
Okay.
Does the board wish to ask the applicant if the applicant would stipulate? As the board
In
can
advance?
deliberates whether or not to grant the rule.
We probably want to talk more about impervious first, not deliberate.
Please continue your deliberations.
It's just important to know how that might mitigate an opinion about impervious, so. Did you have something else to?
No, that's it.
Yes, if we
You
know,
can speak up and ask now.
if we know what the system would use, what kind of burden it would put on the applicant.
It's not like that.
Yeah. Your determination is to be made on the zoning and planning basis,
Okay.
not necessarily a economic basis. Just like the benefits to an applicant or detriments economically are not what's at issue. It's from a zoning and planning perspective.
I stand corrected.
So it might be more prudent to not ask.
I withdraw my question.
Anything?
And it would offset, it would qualify as a C2 offset to the variance for slopes and impervious.
In terms of the sidewalk, which is one of the, sidewalk width is one of the, QLRP constraints, right? 12-foot sidewalk. one way to just creatively, and 7's proposed. 12 is asked, 7 proposed. One of the things that I think the applicant could consider is, setting the first floor back. Not the garage, not the second floor, but the first floor back, some footage to essentially create an overhang from the second floor. And you'd have the width because you're just doing plantings basically there. Something, this is a possible architectural change that could be made for that one aspect of relief. If I said them properly. I'm just kind of going through just deliberation. I'm inclined to say the utilities there are a couple of these that are checkboxes, like probably not a concern, the utilities. I think the loading we've done quite a bit of discussion on loading and they have responded, so nothing there. Access, I think is, as Steve, you mentioned access, that's probably a no-brainer there, in terms of our concerns. I think it really comes down to the two major areas, which are, coverage in general, whether it's impervious or building coverage. And then steep slopes. On steep slopes, my opinion is for undeveloped property, I think steep slopes serve a great purpose of constraining overdevelopment of the undeveloped property and preserving the various benefits of steep slope. And this property, I consider developed. And I consider anything that's been potentially disturbed as out of scope for steep slopes. It's just like, well, if I was gonna tear the house down and build another one, I'm disturbing it. I'm not as concerned about steep slopes for this application. I don't think it represents a significant risk or impediment or whatever to the vision for that area. So I'm inclined to be fairly lenient with the steep slope stuff. I think coverage is a pretty big deal. It's pretty covered. I mean, there's the house and then there's the drive behind it and so forth. It's not included, but it's there. I mean, it's been, it's in use. And I think there could be other uses for the property. But I'm not really unhappy with the fact that it's the 6 units that are there, that they've cut it down. I think the biggest issue is, well, that's been raised is, should this just be a park? And then town just buys it, and it's a park. Versus, do we want to put anything? Does the town want to have anything there? I think it's marginal as a park on that corner. I think there is something there. I think there should still be something there. It could theoretically have been a group home or something like that, but it would have been, a good number of units anyway, to be replaced. So I'm glad they went from 8 to 6. Okay, I'm glad that with the attendant reductions. It would potentially be better if it was 4, but that was a decent compromise, I thought, so.
Can I give a different perspective on
Yeah,
that?
absolutely, that's what we're here for.
First of all, before they put up all the no trespassing signs, I walked the property. And that is a very big piece of property. The house only covers a relatively small fraction of it. You know, I understand a lot of the things the council said, the fact that they allow the greater density, but didn't expand the coverage is confusing. But the fact of the matter was that this site, the plan for this site was written in contemplation of the development by the applicant. And yet they left the coverage ratio as they were for the house as it was, which tells me council has something they were thinking about for a plan on that. The fact that the applicant has gone back to council and asked for an amendment of the plan to cover these and has not gotten a receptive hearing from council tells me that my suspicion that council had a thought about what this property should be used for. Is as reflected in the zoning orders. I'm sorry, in the redevelopment plan. I can't quote the tests for variance, but it's hard for me to see how this large development would, on the face of it, be not inconsistent with what the objective of the zoning scheme was for that site. As far as the steep slope, you know, the engineers, the concern with steep slope is you get runoff into the stream. And as I understand what I've read in the engineering reports and Mr. Bradley's comments, the controls proposed will be adequate to protect runoff. So I really come down to the fact that I just can't see how coverage of almost 5 times, 3 times of well, reach, I guess, can possibly be consistent with exceeding what the town wanted for this site. I think the need for this site is not to come to the zoning the planning board and ask for variance, but to go back to council and get the plan amended. Get that, and so we can be sure we know what council had in mind when it implemented this the plan for this parcel.
Steve, what's the ratio of the, on the house of the, floor plan? The 2 different values?
The building coverage, maximum permitted, which as I understand it will be existing condition, right, public dwelling. The building coverage is 1,375, versus 5,205 proposed. Ballpark 3 times, and the new impervious coverage increased per the recommendation of Mr. Bradley, 7,700 square feet, I'm told, versus 2,475 square feet maximum permitted / existing condition.
My ballpark's a little bit bigger than yours. For the building coverage, it's almost exactly 4 times.
Well, excluding the driveway, the open driveway excluding that.
This is the building part.
I'm sorry, you're correct. I'm sorry. I did 3,900, 4,900. Excuse me. I did 4,900 is 3,900. So yeah, it's in between 3 and 4.
So so it's 1375, which is existing footprint, because that's what's in the.
Right.
The developer.
For the building,
Right, versus the total proposed
5,205 square feet.
5275, okay.
5,205.
5205, and that does exclude the parking spaces and the drive, right? It's
That's
not,
building coverage.
the building is whatever the overhead, whatever the size of this, of the first floor is, I guess.
Correct.
That's the building coverage. Yeah,
Yeah, so don't, yeah, whatever.
you know, the apartments, okay. I just wanted to get the ratio, okay. What else, any?
I don't like the skinny sidewalk, and I think your proposal was a good one. Wide sidewalks was another thing that the plan is supposed to achieve. Especially the prospect, perhaps, or widening at some time later time, the prospect of a possible widening of Claremont.
Oh, mitigate risk.
Yeah.
I'll go.
Good.
Yeah, so Chairman, I do agree with you. I didn't have any issue also with the steep slope. I got the waivers for on-site loading, and all the overhead utilities, you know, that there were nothing really, the vehicle access makes sense with Mill Street. The sidewalk at 7 feet, I like a big sidewalk, but I'm okay with 7 feet. I think that allows people to walk by 2 by 2 down, someone still pass you, carriages, things of that nature. I don't think it's, you know, it's not the corner on 202 by the Palmer Building where it's 3 feet wide, right? So I'm fine with that. With regards to the coverage, you know, there was a lot of talk about the purposes of the redevelopment plan, and two of the other purposes, when you look through that in section 5.1, was also to provide different types of housing in the downtown area, right? Promote the downtown area. And as far as I know, there are no other rental townhomes in that area, right? One of the overall goals of the Quimby plan was to put residents in the downtown to support the downtown. Right now, that whole Quimby section, subsection 6, 1, 2, all of them really have minimal residential, right? It's really just a couple apartments over the station. The overall goal, even of our master plan, is the economic support of the downtown. 6 units may sound like a lot, but I don't think it's overly aggressive. I think the 8, yeah, I think that was part of the size of parking and things of that nature. There was also one of the purposes was architecturally to tie together the whole town. I don't think anyone has a problem with the look of the building, the feel of the building. What's there now doesn't do anything. That is a prominent corner where people do make turns, and you do see it as you're coming down the hill into Claremont. So I think for those purposes, they do hit what the overall concept was of the original Quimby plan, right? I think there's some frustration that collectively as a town we have. That plan is 4 years old, going on 5. And this is really the only application from that plan. I, you know, would vote for it as is. I do like Hal's suggestion with regards to the streams, you know, cleaning it up at TSS. I think that's a condition I would ask for, every 80%. Even though it's minor, it's not required, the DEP didn't do it. I do think that that water that comes down into there now is relatively clean. It doesn't pass through any other industrial sites or farmland or anything else. And if we can keep it that way, I think that's important also. That being said, I was fine with both conditions, so this would be something I would support.
I agree with DeMarco about the need for a little bit of diversification in the downtown area, and I agree that that seemed to be a goal of the council's original plan, and I also do hear you on the PSS that, you know, and like you said, that this is, you know, one of the first, the first real development in this zone. It would of course be a good thing to, you know, uphold a certain standard when it comes to our local waterways there. So I do see that. When it comes to the sidewalk, you know, again, I know.
Claremont sidewalk?
Claremont sidewalk, yes. You know, I know there was a bigger requirement, but, you know, I do see that, you know, 7 it would be a extraordinary improvement from the current state. And I do think that, you know, 6 townhouses on this property as opposed to, you know, 8 or a different number is reasonable. And so I am inclined to support this project. Generally speaking.
My turn?
You can.
I agree with almost everything Mr. DeMarco said. I agree with Mr. Simoff that if we can put in the TSS, there are legitimate concerns with stormwater. And while our engineer has accepted it, if we can add that, I think that addresses the concerns we have and the environmental commission has. I believe that it is concerning when you look at the footprint and the impervious coverage, when you look at the numbers out of context, it is alarming. The original plan does refer to the original footprint, but in 2022, when they amended the plan and they offered that there could be greater density, there is no logic in offering the greater density and withholding the original requirement of staying within the footprint. So there is basis for granting the variance, I believe, for the greater impervious coverage. And let's see, stormwater was a big concern of mine. And affordable housing, I agree, goes to the town. So I would be inclined to say yes.
Anything else coming to mind?
Oh, I'm sorry, and your idea of shifting back. I like the idea of as large a sidewalk as we can have, if that's something they would consider, but I'm inclined to say yes.
Anything else? Anything? We're just basically, we're done. Go ahead, good.
Does the sidewalk have a special treatment? Is there a downtown concept for the treatment of
You mean like a design?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
So this would just be a
I don't think so. I think it's just your standard.
concrete.
There might be a pattern.
I don't think so.
It might be, have to be scored, but they would have to come
If
down.
there were tree wells, they would have something to say about it, I think, like what the grade sizes should be and things like that, but that's not proposed.
If there's no standard for the sidewalk design, I think the 7 feet is adequate. If this is on the edge of the redevelopment area, maybe downtown it will be more important because you have more pedestrian activity. But here you don't have as much.
Was the pin, is it 7 feet flush to the building front, or is there like a shrubbery there or something? Is there like well, you know.
7 feet is up against the curb.
The curve, yeah.
And then there is a foundation planting area between the sidewalk.
Okay, and how wide is that foundation? That's good.
It looks to be 6 feet.
I'm sorry, you
He's just checking what's on the plan.
7 feet, it's got the step coming down for each unit, so approximately 6 to 7 feet.
Oh, okay, all right, so. Good, okay.
Sorry, I'm following that. It's
7 foot
feet,
sidewalk.
7 foot sidewalk,
Real.
an additional.
Additional 6 feet,
6 feet.
and for most of the frontage, except that's where the stairs come down.
Right.
So they, is that what you're saying?
The building is set back 6 or 7 feet from the
Yeah, the
property
building-
line.
Staircase.
Back in, the sidewalk is close to the front lot line,
Right,
and then from there, the building is set back.
6-ish feet.
It's
In other words, from the curb line to the front of the building is like 13 feet.
There's a 5 foot setback. It's kind of varied. The right of way line is not perfectly parallel with the building.
And on the south end, it's 6.2, and on the north end, it's
Right, to the point where it's,
But the key is the sidewalk's not running right up to the front of the building, that's all. Which makes sense, it's just, I'm just going with it from a perspective standpoint, I'm walking on your 7 foot sidewalk and it's like, there's still 6 feet to the window. Okay. Yeah, I would say frankly, I'm content with there not being any change to that. If they would just need to assess what they felt the future risk of the county in further encroaching and how it would impact the way their building works, that's all.
But the county has for 66 foot right away, you know, existing footprint. So they can exist more.
Yeah.
dedication to the county.
They'll still need,
That includes sidewalks.
yeah, my understanding is they will still have to go back with this plan to the county.
Anyway,
Anyway,
yeah, I'm just saying it's not as bad as it sounds. It's not downtown where the sidewalk's running
No, I
right
mean,
into the front of.
they
but
would
yeah, have to
probably
do
go
this
and
anyway.
seek a waiver of that right of way or
Request.
request from the.
Well, they show the 66 foot.
Yeah.
And the county, I think the county's after an easement, showing easement on.
Okay, and in your opinion, is there any, what's the, like he's pointing at the drawing, but is there, what's the implication?
If the county would go on,
Uh-huh,
that one, they could probably have spaces first.
right.
Use that area, maybe.
Well,
I don't think they would ship a thing over for another lane.
Yeah.
The easement wouldn't allow that.
yeah, they wouldn't do another travel lane for sure.
They would lose the parking spaces. probably.
Oh, they would lose the parking spaces that are
The county.
Oh,
there. Yeah, we would lose that, so that's the risk. The risk of the parking spaces would be. Okay. Just wanted to cover this.
So the board is wrapping up its deliberations, and are there any conditions the board wishes to ask the applicant to stipulate?
It sounds like TSS is a wise thing to ask to stipulate.
At the 80%.
Right, the 80%.
Yeah, the DEP has approved,
That's why I asked at the beginning, what, at what?
Yeah, but I just want to make sure.
DEP approved 80%.
80. Okay, Mr. Kernos, if need be, can you consult with your engineer and client to advise the board whether or not the applicant stipulates to the BSS removal request the condition?
We have, when Mr. Simoff raised the point, we discussed it and we said if that's a condition of approval, it's acceptable.
Okay, appreciate that stipulation. The board has a stipulation. Perhaps the board's ready to either conclude its deliberations or go right to a vote at this point.
I think we concluded our deliberations, so I'll entertain, go ahead and read your.
Oh, it hasn't changed. It's what it was before.
What it was.
With the additional stipulated condition
Giving you.
as to 80% TSS removed.
We're gonna approve DEP mechanism.
Right. Correct.
Okay.
All the other relief is the same and all the other conditions continue to apply. If it's a motion, to approve, I'll assume it's a roll.
Motion to approve. Okay,
I will second.
Mr. Simoff,
Yes.
Ms. Geller,
Yes.
Mr. Bryan,
Yes.
Mr. Horowitz,
No.
Mr. Simoff,
Yes.
and Mr. Zazarino.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Go on.
Thank you and good night.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Christmas, too.
You didn't hear any of that. What? You didn't hear any of it.
Oh.
The idea that, you know.
No, we're gonna just speak it.
Still not.
You're still on. They're pending application. Panifico, who they say is
They will be,
16th.
yes, the 16th, which is our reorg meeting. Left for everyone on the day, so what they just submitted.
Okay, great. No business of visitors, it seems. No executive session?
Yeah.
Not yet.
I'm tempted, but I'll let you.
Okay,
And you go into whether stormwater, updated stormwater.
yeah, and Denise probably should remind me of that. We should find out if we should, ask for stormwater management update training session.
Which could be via Zoom.
And
It
it should just,
change so frequently, you better keep.
and
If you miss one or two, then.
it should also involve the, anyone else, the Board of Adjustment.
Yes, that, you know what, that usually comes from the Public Works Director. They get those emails and then they send it to me. And I think it's usually around the beginning of the year.
Well, I was told we had to ask for.
Then
I think you should say we're asking for it, but it also should solicit whether we, Board of Adjustment should ask. No, the point is someone has to ask.
So that's.
I think that's it. Happy holidays, everybody. Happy there. You're adjourned.
Yes.
Hey, Mark. I'm still trying to get